Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we sift through all the noise, the articles, the research, the notes, and really give you the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed.
And today we are taking on a really deep, complex, and I think vital topic, decoding the recent evolution of intimacy.
It feels like it's the topic everyone is talking about, but maybe not with the right framework.
I think that's right. And we've compiled a fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive. I mean, we have everything from transcripts of modern relationship therapy sessions to critiques of contemporary attachment theory.
And even some philosophical songwriting lyrics that are using these incredible ancient metaphors.
Exactly. So our mission today is really to unpack a central paradox of, I guess, the 21st century.
Right, Jen?
Why, in an era of just unprecedented personal freedom and relational choice, do we so often feel so profoundly relationally inept?
Okay, let's unpack that paradox right away, because that is the hook, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's what drags so many people into counseling or just constant searching.
It really is.
We have more tools, more options, more apps, fewer social constraints on our choices than at any time in history.
And
yet, one of our sources, a prominent relationship therapist, she notes that we have never had more freedom in our relationship choices and at the same time, fewer actual relational skills.
It's a wild contradiction.
It's almost like the technological ease of connection has somehow masked this massive deficit in our emotional capacity.
That deficit, it actually has a name in our source material, and it's called social atrophy.
Social atrophy.
Yeah. And that is the core problem that's kind of defining modern intimacy. Social atrophy is what happens when we remove too much difficulty, too much friction from our daily lives.
So we want the deep connection.
We crave it. We idealize this transcendent intimacy, but we instinctively avoid the very thing that builds it.
The friction, the discomfort.
Exactly, the mechanism for building it.
Social atrophy, that's such a functional phrase. It's like losing the emotional muscle that you need for connection. But wait, I have to challenge this a little. Isn't this just another word for, laziness?
Yeah.
I mean, if we have all these options, the ability to find partners who align perfectly with our esoteric preferences, the freedom to leave if it gets hard, why not just say people are prioritizing ease over depth?
That's a really fair question, and it speaks to a much bigger cultural shift. I don't think it's necessarily laziness. It's more of a learned aversion to discomfort.
Which is arguably even more insidious.
Way more. I mean, think about the relational environment we've built. When every obstacle can be instantaneously swiped away, or when we can end a difficult conversation, a friendship, even a marriage, without ever having to face the person.
We lose the practice.
We lose the practice, the reps. We lose the necessary practice for navigating differences. So our tolerance for discomfort, for just sitting in a disagreement, it shrinks to almost zero.
And when that tolerance shrinks, we just stop communicating. We resort to, non-verbal signals or passive stuff that is absolutely guaranteed to fail.
Absolutely. And this leads directly to the core problem of silent expectations.
Ah, yes. The resentment that builds from that.
It's a killer. We want to be deeply known, loved, and adored without ever having to go through the messy, vulnerable process of actually revealing who we are.
We want a mind reader.
We expect our partner to be a mind reader, to instinctively know how to love us, to know our triggers, our desires, our trauma, without us ever having to expend the energy to explain what that love even looks like.
And the cost of that silent expectation is just.
Yeah.
It's corrosive. You just sit there waiting to feel seen, waiting for them to finally deliver the love you haven't defined for them.
While you're silently compiling a case against them.
A whole dossier on how they're failing to meet these secret demands you never articulated.
It creates this completely unsustainable emotional debt. And the hard truth, which, the sources highlight over and over, is that closeness should never, ever be expected to be easy or intuitive.
Your partner, no matter how compatible, is not a flawless echo of you.
They're a person with their own intricate wiring, their own past, their own needs. The most beautiful, resonant, and resilient relationships are not built on effortless chemistry alone. They're forged through the uncomfortable conversations.
Through the repair.
Through deliberate repair, through admitting fault, and through, growing that muscle of honesty and open-heartedness.
So the goal isn't to find a partner who eliminates all the friction.
No.
The goal is to find a partner with whom you are willing to face the friction, to navigate all the inevitable differences. We don't need more chemistry. We need more capacity for that necessary challenge.
That's it, exactly. More capacity.
Speaking of structure and capacity, we need to understand the fundamental mechanics of organization itself. So before we dive deeper into human relationships, let's take a slight conceptual pivot.
Okay.
Let's look at the foundational evolution of life itself, because it offers this strange, but I think absolutely compelling structural parallel to how emotional complexity begins.
This takes us way back to the ultimate origins of organization, drawing from a source we've titled Foam of Life. The idea here is that complexity doesn't just spontaneously arise from chaos.
They need structure.
It needs structure. The foam of life concept posits that the earliest stirrings of life may have begun not in some, homogeneous primordial soup, but in specific self-organizing structures.
Like layers and bubbles on the surface of the sea.
In foam, exactly.
I love that image the lyrics paint. Life happened in foam where water found form. It's such an immediate visual for structure preceding function.
Yeah.
But what's the parallel here? What did that structure actually do?
Well, the structure provided containment. It provided boundaries. The key mechanism involved these early membranes, these thin, sort of soap-like walls made of fatty acids that shimmered and held the contents in place.
So that membrane was essentially a boundary.
It's the first boundary. And what happens when you create a boundary? You create an inside and an outside.
You create a protected space, a shield.
Exactly. And our source material really emphasizes that within this contained space, physical organization could begin. Energy gradients could form, creating a kind of micro spark of potential, a foundational charge that allowed the components of early life to start organizing themselves before complex DNA even arrived to govern the whole process.
So the structure, the boundary, it created the containment and the energy gradient that was necessary for complexity to even start.
Precisely.
So the lesson isn't really about biology, it's about organization. The membrane is the rule. The rule creates the container. The container allows the life, the complexity to begin.
That's it. And here is where we connect this structural origin story directly to conscious relationship dynamics. Just as that membrane creates a protected space for physical life to organize and generate a spark.
Boundaries and intentional defined space are required for complex emotional life to begin.
They're absolutely required. If two organisms just dissolve into one another homogeneity, there's no structure, no tension, and no life.
So if the membrane is the boundary, what's the structure in a modern relationship? It's not just walls and rules, is it?
No, it's the intentional space. It's the deliberate pauses, the silence, the clear understanding of limits, and the mutual respect for each other's individual internal worlds.
Our sources that talk about intimate dance, neo-tango specifically, use this concept beautifully, don't they?
Oh, they do. They talk about the necessity of laisser de l'espace pour respirer.
Leaving space to breathe. Tango is such a perfect metaphor because it's just constant negotiation, constant micro-friction. The connection is held in the tension, not in the relaxation.
The bond is woven in the respiration, the push and the pull, not in pressure or desperate clinging. If you watch a tango pair, the moment where the power and the beauty really resides is in the pause.
The stillness.
It's that moment the lead pulls back just slightly, allowing the follower to hold her own axis for a millisecond before the next move. That silence, that momentary absence, it creates the tension and the space for the emotional life of the dance to unfold with grace.
So the boundaries, the membrane, allowed two sovereign beings to align and connect, step by step, without dissolving into a homogeneous mass.
It provides the initial container for the spark, for the desire we're going to talk about later to ignite.
And if we lack the capacity for those boundaries, if we let social atrophy dominate, demanding constant closeness and constant reassurance.
We remove the structure. We end up with two souls trying to occupy the same space without a membrane, which it only results in this messy, frustrated collapse, not complexity. You have to be able to stand alone to truly dance together.
That sets us up perfectly for the next phase of evolution in modern love, moving past that initial chaos of infatuation toward a deliberate, conscious choice. Because once the membrane is established, once the relationship starts to organize, it hits its first major existential test.
It does, and every single long-term relationship expert points to this one critical phase that couples so often mistakenly interpret as a sign to quit.
A sign they made a mistake.
Right. And that phase is called disillusionment.
Disillusionment. It sounds so heavy, but it's really just the inevitable moment when the honeymoon phase, that time when you're just projecting perfection onto your partner fades.
Exactly. You stop seeing your partner as the idealized person you imagine them to be, and you start seeing them as they really are, and their quirks, which were so charming 3 months ago.
The way they leave their socks out, their habit of interrupting.
Their anxiety about money, now they become major irritations. Their flaws feel magnified because the dopamine has just worn off. And this is where most modern friction-averse relationships die.
And the common instinct, especially in a culture that champions endless options, is to think, this isn't working. Did I choose the wrong person?
And the sources are crystal clear on this. Disillusionment is not failure. It is the necessary end of the fantasy. It is the invitation, the portal to true, mature intimacy.
So it's the moment where you're asked to lean in and choose each other, not because the relationship is magically easy or because your partner is perfect.
But because you are willing to do the hard, uncomfortable work required to move forward with the reality of this imperfect human being. And this process involves a profound evolutionary shift in communication.
Moving from blame to dialogue.
That's the leap.
I think our listeners need to hear this illustrated really clearly. Can you give us a detailed example of how that emotional evolution looks in action? Contrast the old, reactive, atrophy-driven pattern with a new, conscious, dialogue-driven response.
Okay, let's use a really common example. Household equity or the mental load in parenting.
That's classic.
The classic. In the old pattern, the woman might feel perpetually exhausted and resentful from carrying what she perceives as a larger load, constantly tracking chores or scheduling. She catches herself thinking,
They are deliberately incompetent.
or they don't care about my time as much as I care about theirs. And that feeling isn't communicated. It just builds silent and hot into resentment, leading to sharp tones, cold shoulders, or weaponized silence.
The classic passive-aggressive spiral that makes both partners miserable because the core problem is being disguised by this emotional warfare.
Precisely. Now, the conscious response, this is the evolutionary leap, is to communicate the emotional reality without the immediate accusation or blame,
So instead of yelling, "Why are these dishes always piled up? You never help me,"
which immediately puts the partner on the defensive. You choose vulnerability. You soften the approach and communicate your internal state. I'm overwhelmed and I'm starting to resent you because I feel like the responsibility for this space rests entirely on my shoulders. Can we pause and figure this division out together?
So you're defining the emotional problem, your resentment, your overwhelm, as a shared challenge to be solved together, rather than labeling it as a character flaw in your partner.
That vulnerability, that courage to speak your truth, is the absolute root of sustainable intimacy. And when partners work through these cycles, they achieve what therapists call differentiation.
Differentiate.
Yeah. Differentiation is the mature state of being where you can realize, okay, we do have fundamentally different opinions on money, on parenting, on cleanliness, and that doesn't mean they're going to abandon me or that I should leave them. It's recognizing and respecting separateness within the connection.
That sounds like the antidote to codependency.
It is. Codependency requires fusion. Differentiation requires boundaries. It goes right back to our membrane analogy.
Right.
In a differentiated relationship, my identity doesn't collapse when my partner is unhappy or when they pursue interests that don't include me. This is why it's such a leap forward from the romance myth that says two halves must merge into one whole.
Differentiation insists that two whole beings must align.
That's it. And when you achieve that stage of differentiation, the sources suggest something truly remarkable happens with curiosity.
It revolutionizes it.
Totally. When you're differentiated, your partner's separate interests, their passions, their need for alone time, their hobbies, they're no longer perceived as a threat to the unity of the relationship.
In the early fused stages, if my partner spends too much time on their hobby, I might see it as rejection.
Exactly. But in the differentiated stage, their separate life becomes a subject of genuine curiosity.
So you start seeing their individual passions as a drain on your shared time, and you start seeing them as an asset that makes them interesting, vibrant, and whole.
Yes, you start asking questions about what they love, and you truly want to be a part of supporting those things, even if you don't participate directly. This capacity for curiosity, for wanting to know the separate landscape of your partner, it deepens the connection rather than dividing it.
It makes the relationship a constant adventure of discovery rather than a predictable, comfortable cage.
It is the evolution from being in love with who you think they are to loving who they actually are.
We have to pivot now to what is maybe the single largest evolutionary force shaping modern relationships today.
I agree.
And that's the radical commitment to internal sovereignty, particularly for women who are actively breaking these deep generational patterns.
This internal revolution is happening on a massive scale, and it's a necessary confrontation with the old scripts. These scripts were written by cultural and family expectations designed to secure safety and love through performance.
The script of being the good girl.
The good girl, the martyr who always gives, or the over-functioning fixer who manages everyone else's stability.
And the cost of performing these scripts is just astronomical. You're essentially suppressing your authentic needs, your truth in exchange for external approval or, transactional security.
The sources describe the physical and emotional cost so vividly. A perpetual state of hypervigilance, walking on eggshells, physical tension, and a chronic debt of resentment. And this debt, it accrues silently until it's just too heavy to carry.
The woman becomes numb.
Physically and emotionally disconnected from her own desires because they contradict the established good girl performance she's been running.
And the sources note that this shift, this claiming of sovereignty, it almost never happens gently. It needs a catalyst.
Yes, often it's a crisis, a betrayal, the death of a parent, or sometimes just a moment of stillness that finally cracks the shell of numbness she's been carrying. That moment of awakening forces her to claim her essential human needs, often for the very first time.
She wants rest, not performance.
She wants space, not constant co-presence. She wants respect, not tolerance. And crucially, she demands touch and sexuality on her own terms.
This means she is reclaiming the responsibility for her own internal state. And by doing that, she's stopping the exhausting cycle of trying to manage everyone else's emotions.
She starts to honor the reality that she cannot be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
And it is terrifying because there's no pre-existing cultural script for this woman.
The woman who is both loving and demanding, both connected and radically autonomous.
Right. She's no longer defining herself by external roles, mother, wife, daughter, but by her internal alignment.
And here is the core insight that I think our listeners really need to grasp. When she begins to claim that sovereignty, not apologize for it, not perform it dramatically, but truly inhabit it as her default state, she doesn't actually lose love.
No, she eliminates conditional love and she finds real love. Love that sees her, that respects her boundaries, and that doesn't require her to shrink or disconnect or dilute herself to fit some pre-approved mold.
The outcome is transformative.
The sources describe it so beautifully. Her voice is no longer a whisper of apology. Her body is no longer a battlefield of anxiety. Her mind is no longer a prison of expectation.
Her aliveness is not an accessory to the relationship. It is a necessity. It's her birthright. And if the relationship cannot hold her aliveness,
And the relationship must change or it must end. This internal revolution is fundamentally linked to the concept of erotic self-connection as the foundation of true intimacy. It's the highest expression of that sovereignty.
So what does it mean to own your sexuality in this evolved context? Because for so long, female sexuality was viewed primarily as a currency for validation or selection.
It means refusing to let your sexuality be a currency used to be chosen, validated, or manipulated. It's redefined as a primary expression of your inner landscape, your mentality, your art. It requires attention, space, and deep freedom.
So sexual sovereignty means knowing definitively what is a yes and what is a no in your body.
Not in your mind, but in the immediate physical experience. And then honoring that wisdom, refusing to abandon yourself or your boundaries, even when that means causing discomfort in a partner.
So honoring the body's wisdom, the tightening, the relaxing, the opening, the closing, that becomes the ultimate sign of self-respect, and that self-respect is non-negotiable.
Precisely. Your body is not a tool used to get someone else off. It is the physical representation of your core truth, and that truth must be protected. The erotic self is the part of you that resists domestication, that refuses to be reduced to a partner's object of desire.
And when you meet another person from that place of wholeness, not emptiness,
That is where true explosive intimacy begins, because you have something magnificent to share, not something you need to receive.
so if the feminine revolution is fundamentally about internal authenticity and claiming needs, the masculine challenge, particularly in the dating and long-term relationship scene, is about navigating authenticity versus performance in a different way.
A very different way, absolutely. The sources highlight a modern archetype that is causing major confusion and friction. The man who performs emotional literacy but lacks genuine groundedness.
The fake sacred man.
Let's call him that. He's mastered the language, but not the delivery.
Okay, what does that mean?
They've learned the therapeutic language. They use phrases like holding space. They talk extensively about the divine feminine. They drop complex lines about emotions. But they use this language not to genuinely serve the connection, but as an advanced manipulative tool.
Designed to feed a fragile ego.
And keep women orbiting them as fuel. They are mirroring the woman's needs back to her, creating the illusion of deep sight, when they are in fact only reflecting back her own feelings to get an ego boost of being seen as the insightful spiritual man. It's just camouflage.
So he performs presence, But he isn't truly seeing the woman. He's trying to manage her experience of him.
And the test of reality always reveals the performance. When real-life accountability is required, the work of staying present through a partner's genuine emotional crisis, owning a failure from a past relationship, or just managing the banal friction of daily life, they disappear.
The performance is too heavy.
It is. They prefer to curate this kind of nomadic, enlightened vibe, which often masks a critical lack of maturity, structure, or emotional durability.
That's a highly specific, though I think very common, problem in the recent evolution of relationships. But what about the broader challenges for men, particularly older men or men transitioning into meaningful, long-term commitment? We need to broaden this landscape beyond these niche archetypes.
The broader masculine challenge today is integrating vulnerability without collapsing into neediness and maintaining a grounded presence despite all these cultural pressures. For example, many men struggle with the shifting landscape of provider roles.
The economic anxiety.
The economic anxiety, the constant pressure to win in a career, it can make men emotionally illiterate because their entire sense of worth is tied up in external performance, leaving no room for internal emotional complexity.
So if that external validation crumbles, the man has no internal center to fall back on, and he seeks validation from his partner instead.
Which is why the sources suggest a move toward an internal focus, a grounded form of modern stoicism, is absolutely essential for meaningful relationships. Take the mistake an older man sometimes makes when dating a younger woman.
Trying to shrink himself.
Yes, trying to talk or dress like her, or obsessively keeping up with her trends. The moment he does this, he loses the very groundedness, the quiet authority, and the settled energy that made him attractive in the first place.
So instead, the truly evolved approach is self-possession. His value is not dependent on her approval, her praise, or her perceived needs.
He must remain centered and emotionally self-sufficient. The moment he needs her validation to feel centered, the moment he starts orbiting her emotional world like a moon desperate for gravity, she loses interest.
That desperate search for approval is not attraction. It's emotional erosion.
It is. A centered man leads with emotional intelligence. He stays acutely attuned. He notices the shift in her tone. He senses the meaning behind her silence. He's aware of the atmosphere. But he doesn't become reactive. He doesn't try to immediately fix her or interrogate her feelings.
He gives her space to process her emotional landscape without feeling responsible for it. He doesn't panic when she withdraws.
Precisely. When she withdraws, whether it's due to a past wound, a moment of processing, or simply needing alone time, she is watching.
Will you become clingy, demanding, or suspicious?
Or will you remain grounded, respectful, and self-assured? If he can meet that necessary withdrawal with steadiness, he offers her something profoundly rare in the modern landscape: secure, non-needy presence.
That dynamic is so powerfully mirrored when we look at avoidant attachment dynamics and the collapsing pattern. What happens when a woman truly chooses her sovereignty and walks away from an avoidant partner?
The avoidant dynamic is built on controlling the distance. Avoidant partners tend to devalue intimacy and idealize independence. They push away closeness, often drawn to available partners, but then overwhelmed when that availability expects real, mutual reciprocity.
They use strategies like stalling, criticizing, testing.
And expecting the partner to chase, thereby proving their own desirability without having to actually commit.
It's a game of chicken, where the avoidant partner assumes the anxious or loving partner will always swerve first.
But when the woman recognizes the pattern, claims her sovereignty, and truly exits, no call, no closure, no checking social media, no providing crumbs of hope, the dynamic collapses.
She stops playing the game.
She removes the external validation loop that the avoidant needs to maintain their self-concept.
He is suddenly left with the reality of himself, not the relationship he could manage.
And the realization, which often comes way too late, is devastating. He can no longer define her as the needy one, the demanding one, or the one who requires too much. She needs nothing from him.
So the core realization is that she was not weak for loving him intensely.
But she was profoundly strong for leaving him entirely. Her presence, which he took for granted and used as a tool to maintain distance, was a gift, not a given right. Breaking his ego means refusing to perform for someone who critiques your every step. That is the ultimate act of self-possession that forces growth in the other.
So if the new relationship paradigm requires sovereignty, differentiation, and presence, the language of desire has also had to evolve dramatically. We're moving away from the old models of, certain possession and consumption.
Towards something more nuanced, something that understands that desire requires a certain amount of space to breathe.
Absolutely. The philosophy of desire. heavily influenced by relational thinkers mentioned in our sources, insists that desire thrives on distance, mystery, and focused presence, not certainty.
Certainty kills curiosity, and curiosity is the engine of desire.
So intimacy grows through curiosity rather than through full, immediate, overwhelming exposure. How do we apply that practically? Does that mean withholding information?
Not withholding, but controlling the pacing. You don't reveal every detail of your inner world, every fear, every desire all at once. You allow your partner to discover you layer by layer.
So vulnerability in this context is controlled strength, not just exposure or emotional dumping.
Exactly. It's knowing exactly what you are revealing and why you are revealing it, instead of using your trauma as a conversation piece.
That's a beautiful distinction. Vulnerability as a surgical act, not an indiscriminate flood.
And this emphasis on precision extends to communication. Words hold incredible power in the evolved language of desire. The right tone, the right pause, the right phrase, what the sources call the economy of words, can turn a simple conversation into something unforgettable.
A thought that lingers in the partner's mind long after you've left the room. It's the restraint, the implied knowledge, that becomes magnetic.
And this is why the arts, particularly neo-tango, become such a perfect metaphor for complex relational evolution. The dance is literally a conversation about distance and tension.
Our sources contain these fascinating bilingual lyrics, deeply steeped in the sensibility of neo-tango. The dance itself is a constant mutual negotiation of tension and consent, an agreement to navigate the space between them.
Right.
I find the language used in those songs incredibly illuminating. Take the titles. La Dernière Danse,
Presque.
The Last Dance, or Almost, or Dernier Corps à Corps, Last Body to Body. They thrive on that delicious ambiguity, that constant question mark.
And within the dance, the lyrics reveal the internal dialogue of constant negotiation. Ta jambe cherche, mon axe plaît,
Your leg searches, my axis bends.
which speaks to yielding without breaking one's center. Or tu veux danser, ou que j'insiste.
Do you want to dance? Or do you want me to insist? It is flirtation as a language, a conversation between bodies about where the boundary is, who holds the center, and who leads the next turn.
It's not about forceful leading. It's about establishing the slight resistance that makes the eventual surrender profound and intentional. The tension between the two bodies is where the energy resides.
And this circles back one final time to the necessity of space. Laisser de l'espace pour respirer.
Love is conceptualized as a breeze that circulates better when the windows are open, when there is no clinging or desperate pressure. The connection unfolds with grace, because the partners trust the return. The silences speak volumes. The absences teach self-possession.
That leads us to maybe the most radical concept found in our sources. The reinterpretation of ownership in love. Historically, the phrase, I own you, means domination, control, sexual possession.
But the evolved meaning turns that idea completely on its head.
It's a deep philosophical and emotional shift, moving the concept of ownership from domination toward devotion, responsibility, and spiritual integration.
We can look to thinkers like Erich Fromm, who contrasted the having mode with the being mode. The having mode views love as a commodity, something to possess and protect, often leading to possessiveness and jealousy.
It's checking their phone or tracking their social media activity to own their time.
Right. The being mode, conversely, is about integration and care, where the relationship itself is an ongoing creation, not a static possession.
So the evolved meaning of I own you becomes what? I hold you so fully in my heart and acknowledge you so completely that you are part of my being.
Yes. It's a silent declaration of cherishing. It suggests mutual belonging and deep, undeniable accountability without all the transactional baggage of traditional possession.
So it reframes the taboo phrase into a commitment. You are so integrated into my existence that I am responsible for you and your well-being as if it were my own limb.
It's stewardship, kinship. You own the relationship by taking care of it as if it were inseparable from you, seeing the other person as part of your existence, not as something to be controlled or caged.
This represents the pinnacle of evolved intimacy, the freedom to choose radical belonging, but only after radical sovereignty has been secured.
That's the key.
So as relationships evolve and often grow stronger through this friction, they can also evolve away from you. We need to look at the subtle micro-signals of relational decline, those tiny behavioral cues that indicate an emotional departure has already occurred.
The first major signal is avoidance, disguised as busyness, which we touched on earlier with social atrophy. You see this when a partner is perpetually busy lately, or their communication shifts from these detailed replies to Dry, rushed, or obligatory one-word answers.
And the sources are quite blunt about this, aren't they? It's a necessary, harsh truth to absorb.
They are. If someone genuinely wants to talk to you, they will make time. Even if it's 5 minutes of dedicated focus, because we sleep next to our phones and check them dozens of times a day.
So if someone is consistently taking hours or days to respond and giving those "sorry, I've had a lot going on" replies, what are the actionable microsignals that confirm that an emotional departure is happening?
Okay, so look for the consistent shift in patterns. Signal 1, channel changing. They shift key communication from deep talks to only logistical texts about groceries or bills. Signal 2, the lack of future tense. They stop using we when talking about plans 3 months from now. It's always I or my.
Signal 3, the withdrawal of intentional physical touch. The spontaneous kiss or hand-holding disappears, replaced only by functional touch, like passing a dish.
Signal 4, minimalist listening. They are present physically, but their eyes glaze over when you discuss your emotional reality or a complex problem.
And Signal 5,
The sudden onset of new hobbies or obligations that conveniently require solo time and have high barriers to entry, making it hard for you to join.
so they're building an escape hatch, or at least a separate life, and maintaining polite communication is just the minimal emotional overhead.
They're being polite, not honest. When someone wants to communicate, excuses are finite. When they don't, excuses become infinite. And this is where emotional boundaries are absolutely necessary.
You must stop waiting for a reply that isn't coming.
You have to stop trying to prove your worth to someone who is not actively checking for you. That is a crucial claim of self-respect.
And often, when the partner who is waiting finally raises a concern about this distance, they are met with a classic manipulation tactic designed to shut down the inquiry.
Yes, the phrase, "you're being dramatic," or "you're overthinking everything." This is textbook psychological deflection.
How does that work?
Well, instead of addressing the legitimate concern or the direct question about the distance, they immediately shift the focus to your supposed emotional instability or insecurity, thereby making you the problem.
It's designed to make you stop digging deeper and question your own perception of reality.
It is a way to announce emotional departure without inviting accountability or dialogue.
That micro-level burnout, constantly trying to read minds, constantly managing someone else's emotional state, constantly having to defend yourself from deflection. It brings us to a fascinating macro-level analogy about why complex systems, like relationships, ultimately collapse.
This brings us to Joseph Tainter's principle. It suggests that historical civilizations eventually collapse, not because of external invaders, but because institutional complexity and bureaucratic overhead become too costly to maintain.
The cost of maintaining the administrators, the infrastructure, and the complexity itself eventually yields diminishing returns until it exceeds the benefits.
Right.
So, applying that analogy to personal life,
Right.
what is the relational overhead that becomes unsustainable? What's the personal bureaucracy that collapses the system?
It's the cumulative cost of emotional labor and unspoken rules. The overhead is managing everyone else's feelings, navigating silent expectations, trying to decipher hidden meanings, avoiding necessary confrontation, and dealing with that chronic anxiety of never knowing where you stand.
All these unspoken rules,
Mhm.
all the mental infrastructure required to maintain the illusion of ease, just becomes too heavy.
This emotional and relational overhead becomes so high that the energy required to maintain the system exceeds the joy derived from the connection. It leads to personal burnout and relational collapse, much like a bureaucratic civilization collapsing under its own weight.
So the ultimate path toward survival and happiness, whether for a civilization or a relationship, requires simplification and honesty.
Cutting the emotional overhead. The friction we talked about in the introduction, those difficult, honest conversations, is the necessary cost of maintenance. Avoiding that cost leads to the eventual collapse under the weight of accumulated, unspoken complexity.
You have to simplify the rules, state your needs, accept the conflict, and move forward.
That's the only way.
Okay, let's bring this powerful deep dive to a close. We've explored the structural necessity of boundaries in the primordial foam, the emotional necessity of friction in achieving differentiation, and the self-liberation found in claiming sovereignty.
The evolution of modern intimacy is demanding that we become better, more self-aware, and more durable partners. It requires us to move away from the expectation of effortless compatibility and toward the commitment of intentional co-creation.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, as you navigate this evolved landscape. We discussed that the woman who chooses herself, who claims her needs for rest, space, and respect, is often labeled by others as difficult, dramatic, or cold. She's called selfish.
Right. The crucial distinction, and the next step in your own evolution, is in challenging that label in your internal dialogue. The functional definition of selfish is doing what is in your best interest without regard for others.
So if you are choosing rest, space, or honesty, you are acting in your own necessary self-interest. That is self-care. It only crosses the line into selfishness if you are doing it in a manner that disregards the humanity of your partner or community.
For instance, if you communicate your need for space by simply disappearing without a word, that's disregard.
Exactly.
Recognizing that self-care and claiming your needs are not selfish is the foundational act of sovereignty. It is necessary. It is the only way you can heal the social atrophy that keeps you small, because only when you operate from a place of fullness, not sacrificing from a place of emptiness.
Can you give the kind of profound, real love that this evolved world demands? That is the true rebellion against the old script, claiming your life so completely you have more of it to share.